Welcome to Real Hollywoodland, where we delve into the stars and stories of old Hollywood. Before we get started, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want more old Hollywood related videos. Okay, enough of that, let's dive in. This video is a little different from my previous videos, as I was inspired to make this video by the upcoming Billie Holiday biopic, The United States vs. Billie Holiday, which will be coming out on Hulu late February 2021. The movie will notably star Andra as Billie Holiday and Natasha Lyonne as Tallulah Bankhead, and will follow Holiday as she is targeted by the Federal Department of Narcotics leading up to her 1947 imprisonment for drug possession and its aftermath on her life and career. So, though she is not viewed as a traditional old Hollywood star, her life ran parallel and often intersected with that world. This video will explore not just her life, but those old Hollywood intersections and influences as well. This video will be part of a 3-part series revolving around this film. In addition to this video, I will make one about actress Tallulah Bankhead, who was prominent in Billie's life for a period, and I'll also do a review and share my thoughts on the movie itself. Where to start? There is so much to say about the life of singer and performer Billie Holiday, and the woman behind the legend. But how do I discuss her story? I don't want to frame this story as just one of a tragic figure, a drug addict, or a victim of her circumstances and the time in which she lived. Who was this woman who taught Frank Sinatra how to bend his notes and whose fans included Ava Gardner, Lana Turner, and Clark Gable? I also did not want to focus on the abusive men that came in and out of her life. Although in the 1972 Diana Ross biopic Lady Sings the Blues, only one husband is depicted, she was involved with several abusive men, some of who she married, and some who she did not. Her last husband being Louis McKay, a mafia enforcer who would inherit her estate, even though they were estranged at the time of her death. Although she only had 70 cents in her bank account and $7.50 in cash at the time of her death, her estate was worth over $17 million in 2014 and is probably worth much more now. So, if I don't want to focus on those aspects of her life, what will this video focus on? Many of those things could not be avoided as they shaped who she was as a performer and a woman. This video will focus on her childhood, rise to fame, and attempt to fill in some of the gaps that were excluded from her autobiographical telling of her story, Lady Sings the Blues. According to the book Billie Holiday, the Musician and the Myth by John Swed, several of her relationships were omitted from her autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues. During final revisions of the book, figures in Billie's life, including actor Charles Laughton, actress Tallulah Bankhead, and Billie's former manager and lover John Levy, demanded that references to them be deleted. Bankhead even threatened Doubleday with a lawsuit if her name appeared in the book. Billie tried and failed to get Tallulah to drop her objections and threatened to get witnesses to embarrass Tallulah, but she was ultimately omitted from the book anyway. Tallulah will be included in the upcoming movie, and I'll discuss more about their relationships later in this video. Okay, let's discuss Billie's background before we get into everything else. Billie Holiday was born Eleanor Fagan, April 7, 1915 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to teenage parents, Sarah or Sadie Fagan and Clarence Holiday. Not long after she was born, Clarence left his young family to pursue a career as a banjo player and guitarist. There is some dispute among historians as to her paternity, as her birth certificate says that her father was another man. Some historians consider this an anomaly, inserted by the hospital or government worker, but this shows that Billie's life wasn't simple, even from the very beginning. She would mostly grow up in Baltimore. Her mother was often working on the passenger railroad, so Eleanor stayed with family members for most of the first decade of her life. As a child, she often skipped school, and her truancy led her to being brought to juvenile court when she was just 9 years old and was sent to Catholic reform school. By age 11, she had dropped out of school and was working in her mother's restaurant. That same year, her mother discovered that a neighbor attempted to rape Eleanor. Eleanor was able to fight him off, and the assailant was arrested. At 12 years old, she began running errands at a local brothel. This was around the time when she first started listening and hearing music of Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith, who would be her early influences. During this time, her mother Sadie had moved to Harlem, and Eleanor moved up there with her around age 14 in 1929. Sadie was working as a prostitute, and it wasn't before long that Eleanor began the same line of work at $5 per client. The house was raided shortly after her arriving there, and both Eleanor and Sadie were sent to prison. Once out of jail, Eleanor began performing in Harlem nightclubs under the name Billie Holiday, taking the name Billie Dove after an actress she admired. Billie Holiday would make her recording debut at age 18. By age 22, in 1937, she began singing and touring with Count Basie's jazz and blues band. Basie's band would grow in popularity, as would Billie's during this time. At the peak of her popularity with the band, Billie actually left. It's disputed as to whether she quit over musical differences and difficult working conditions, or if she was actually fired for being difficult to work with and unreliable. It depends on who you ask. Soon after leaving Count's band, she began singing with Artie Shaw in 1938, as one of the first black women to sing with an all-white orchestra. Artie later made his rounds in Hollywood and would get married 8 times, and his wives included Lana Turner and Ava Gardner. Anyway, Artie first saw Billie at an up-and-coming Harlem nightclub, whose patrons included Mae West, Joan Crawford, and Jack Dempsey. Once she joined the band, touring proved to be difficult, as Billie had difficulty being accommodated at the hotels where the band stayed, especially in the South. The band did everything they could to protect her, but that ultimately wouldn't be enough. On one occasion at the Lincoln Hotel in New York, she was asked to use the service elevator because the white patrons complained, and the hotel did not want to give the impression that black people or people of color in general were welcome there. This was the last straw after a string of indignities, and she ultimately left the band and began recording and performing on her own again. Now the year is 1939, and Gone with the Wind, the epic about the Old South, from the start of the Civil War through Reconstruction, premiered, complete with romantic images of plantation life and slavery. That same year, Billie Holiday began singing Strange Fruit. The controversial song was based on a poem about lynching of black men in the South. Despite much resistance from venue owners and others, she would sing this contentious song for the next 20 years, as it was the song that made her a star. Her most popular song and biggest commercial success was with 1941's God Bless the Child. According to Billie, her mother, Sadie, started borrowing large sums of money from her, and when Billie fell on hard times and asked for some money in return, her mother turned her down. That's when she said, "God bless the child that's got his own." From that, the song was written, God Bless the Child. That would become her most popular and most covered song. To fully understand her music, I suggest that you listen to This Is Billie Holiday playlist on Spotify when you have a chance. I could try to describe it here, but I definitely would not do it any kind of justice. As her success grew, she began performing regularly in LA, where her audience often included Betty Davis, Lana Turner, and Orson Welles. She spent many of her nights in LA with Orson, even though she had recently married Jimmy Monroe and Orson was engaged to Dolores Del Rio. They would often go back to her hotel room and he would act out his scenes from his films, including Citizen Kane and The Magnificent Ambersons. All of this raised eyebrows with them being seen around town together, including from the executives at RKO, Orson's studio, who warned Billie to stay away from Orson and threatened that she would not be able to work in Hollywood if this continued. After this time, Billie would not see Orson for several years later, until she was performing again in LA. At this point, he was married to actress Rita Hayworth. According to Billie, the three of them sat down for a drink, and when it was her time to get up and sing, Orson grabbed her hand, causing Rita to slap him in the face and walk out. Although Billie told Orson to go after her, he let Rita go. Billie and Orson hung out in LA for the next few days. With more exposure, Billie gained more popularity and commercial success in the 1940s, and she began her only major film, New Orleans, a movie about the creation of jazz for United Artists in 1946. This film had actually originally been the brainchild of Orson, but the iteration that was actually made was much different than originally intended. This version starred jazz great Louis Armstrong along with Billie. However, due to McCarthyism and several other production issues, most of Billie's scenes were ultimately cut from the movie. Unfortunately, as her popularity and profile grew, so did her drug addiction as she began an increased use of hard drugs in the 40s. While working on New Orleans, most of her salary from the film went to buying heroin. At the peak of her commercial success, she had become a target of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics as she was a high-profile drug addict. She was arrested in her New York apartment on May 16, 1947, for narcotics possession. Her attorney wouldn't even come to court to represent her. Although even the district attorney pleaded that she be sent to rehab and not to jail, she was sentenced to the Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia. This conviction caused her to lose her New York City cabaret card, so she would not be able to work anywhere that sold alcohol, which would severely limit her earning potential when she was released less than a year later on March 16, 1948. Once out of prison, she quickly made a comeback and played to a sold-out crowd at Carnegie Hall on March 27, 1948. This sold-out crowd was particularly impressive as her last hit had been 3 years earlier in 1945. The next month, she began a Broadway show called Holiday on Broadway, which closed after just 3 weeks. That summer of 1948, Billie was booked at the Strand Theater in New York, which was a significant gig to help continue to rebuild her image after being released from prison and still not having a cabaret card. During her run at the Strand, she had only about 2 hours between performances, so she was basically confined to her dressing room or the bars near the theaters during her breaks. Actress Tallulah Bankhead, who Billie had met while singing in the clubs in Harlem, was starring in a show around the corner and would come to visit Billie often, and well, they would spend time together, with the door open at Tallulah's insistence since she was kind of an exhibitionist. Their relationship pretty much fizzled after Billie's gig at the Strand was over, and Tallulah even accused Billie of trying to duck her, though their relationship was not completely over. Tallulah would actually pay Billie's bail when she got in trouble with the law, and at one point she even hired Billie's mother as her maid to help Sadie make ends meet. In 1949, Billie was arrested again in San Francisco in her room at the Hotel Mark Twain. Tallulah called J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI at the time, on a 3-way call with Billie to try to get the charges dropped, even though the arrest was out of his jurisdiction. As I said at the beginning of this video, when Billie was writing her autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues, in 1956, Tallulah demanded that any reference to her be omitted from the book, or she would sue the publisher. It was unknown why she was so adamant about being omitted from the book. My guess is that she probably wanted to preserve the secrets that she kept about her own life. Tallulah attended Billie's funeral and was seen leaning over the coffin whispering something to her. It is anyone's guess what she said. By the 1950s, times were tough for Billie. Without being able to perform in cabarets and the waning popularity of her records, her earnings were greatly reduced, plus she was not receiving royalties from her records because they were out of print. Due to all of this, by 1958, she only received $11 in royalties. Also, by this point, her drug use and drinking had taken a toll on her health, which also impacted her voice, appearance, and ability to perform. In early 1959, she was diagnosed with cirrhosis and went to the hospital on May 31, 1959. Still a target by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, she was arrested and handcuffed for drug possession in her hospital bed as she lay dying. She would die July 17, 1959, at age 44. One of the reasons she wrote Lady Sings the Blues and wanted it to become a movie was because she didn't want to be forgotten. And now, over 60 years after her death, we can firmly say that she and her music have not been forgotten.
Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel for more old Hollywood content.